What's up, everybody, and welcome to a very special edition of what is normally the Power Ranking show, but today is the 22 Under 22 presented by Body Armor show. It's a different type of ranking. God, I love lists. I always have. And it is a perfect day for Andrew Wiebe as well as Matt Doyle to go through something we're really, really passionate about, which is hashtag Play Your Kids, Doyle. And for a long time, hashtag Play Your Kids was a plea to MLS managers. Please play your kids. They're right there in front of you. If you play them, they might just develop in front of your eyes into, I don't know, a 7-figure transfer. Hell, make it 8 figures, an international star. Well, we got all of those on the 22 Under 22 list in 2022. Big thanks to Body Armor for supporting this. They have for a couple years now. A fun fact for our producer, Phil Levanco, is that Body Armor was founded in Queens, New York, where one Phil Levanco was also quote-unquote founded. So before we jump into the 22 and give you the 10 players that we want to shine a spotlight on, Doyle, let's just give some perspective on this list because it's been around for more than a decade now. I remember the beginnings. It was 24 Under 24 then. I remember when we as an editorial group at MLSsoccer.com got together and said, look, 24 just in terms of, the world and player development is just too old. And it used to be at 24, we'd fill, half the list with guys that were getting some playing time in MLS, not to the level they are now. And then the rest was straight up prospects, guys that were not even playing, but just had big profiles for whatever reason, youth internationals, or had been big in the academy ranks, etc. No longer is that the case. This is full of guys who are starters, who are making impacts in MLS, who are playing high leverage minutes, having big moments, doing it for their club team, doing it for their national team. And if we look at the past winners, for example, are now doing it overseas as well. So if you want a little perspective, I mean, here's last 5 years. Ricardo Pepi in 2021, much. He was transferred for Augsburg, slow start, found his level, it seems, in Groningen, but obviously had a huge season in Major League Soccer, likely going to the World Cup with the U.S. The year before that, Brendan Aronson in 2020. We know what he's doing at Leeds. Year before that, in 2019, Diego Rossi, now doing his thing in Turkey. For one of the biggest clubs there. Alphonso Davies in 2018, need I say more, and Miguel Almiron in 2017. Doyle, the names have always been big at the top of the list, but what impresses me most this year is the depth. It just goes so deep, way past 22.
It does, and it way past 22 with, as you said, guys who aren't just prospects, guys who aren't just potential, but guys who are being legitimately productive in MLS. It's been a sea change in this league in the way that not just individual teams, but I think the entire league approaches the idea of what they want to be, and the understanding that MLS teams can play on the global stage when it comes to developing some of the best players in the world. And that the best way to do that is to get these guys on the field, get them high leverage minutes, trust the developmental pipeline that didn't used to exist, and now about 15 years in is cranking out Champions League players. Like if you look back to the USSDA, which is now MLS NEXT, almost that entire U.S. national team and a big chunk of Canada as well came through those programs. Guys like Tyler Adams, Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Pulisic's club was a DA club. It's almost all of them, and that has fed into this era of MLS now, where every year we do this list, Weeby, and then every year half dozen of these guys are sold. At least a half dozen of these guys are sold for big money to some of the biggest clubs in the world.
And that's to say nothing of even the guys that have just barely aged out. So if you look back at 2021, you see the likes of Paxton Pomykal,
right?
Brenner, who's had a huge breakout season. On this side, you also see, Jesus Ferreira is there, but he's at number 9. He's hit at number 1 this year. You see an Ayo Akinola age out. You see, Diber Caicedo age out. And you also see guys leave the league, and not just leave the league as they may have in the past. You saw players make small moves or leave when their contracts were up for millions upon millions of dollars. Ricardo Pepi, Daryl Dike, James Sands on loan, but sure, I think pretty safely will be a permanent transfer somewhere. George Bello, Cole Bassett, another loanee. Kevin Paredes, multi-million-dollar transfer. Justin Shea, on loan for now. Moses Nyman. We don't even have Brian Rodriguez in this list. That is maybe the biggest change for young players as well. I mean, playing time begets performance, performance at that age begets a sale oftentimes, Doyle. And if not a sale, a place like our number one this year, in the case of Jesus Ferreira, a huge place within the league itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And then there's a lot of good outcomes. Not everyone's going to hit, not everybody's going to develop to the level that we want and at the pace that we all want. But if you look back at a lot of the guys who 3 years ago we all thought would be special players at some level or another, you end up seeing that they, Daryl DK sold for $8-9 million. Jesus Ferreira, 18 goals, 5 assists, at best 11 caliber season as a 21-year-old. That stuff didn't used to happen in MLS. It's just a different world now, and it's good to see. I don't have to tweet play your kids anymore. Wiebe. It's not a lament, right? It's a victory.
It's a celebration. It's a victory. Yeah, it's a victory lap. I mean, I went to Chicago to talk to Greg Berhalter recently, and I asked him, what's both the positive and negative MLS, and you can go listen to the interview for the negative side, but the positive side, he said, is when you look at this league, even since he left the Crew, the amount of young players playing real minutes, getting extended run, and developing off of that is completely different. And it changes not just the individual future for those players and the collective future of those clubs, but the collective future of national teams, as you mentioned, around this region, whether it's the U.S., it's Canada, it's Central America, and increasingly so South America as well. We'll get to Thiago Almada in just a little bit. Let's take a look at the 2022 list, and we'll get to Jordan Angeli in just a second to talk about Aidan Morris. We'll start with Jayden Nelson, though. Here's your list. At 22, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy. It says a lot that Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy is down there at 22 on the bubble line. I won't read through the whole thing for you on Twitter Spaces. Go to MLSsoccer.com or the MLS app. If you're listening on demand or you're listening on YouTube, watching on YouTube, you can see it right now. I'll just give you the top 10 just so you know. Jack McGlynn of the Union at 10. Mahala Poku of LAFC at 9, Ismael Kone at 8 of CF Montreal, Alan Velasco of Dallas at 7, John Tolkin at 6, Red Bulls player there, LA Galaxy, right back Julian Araujo. Gaga Slonina, we know he is on his way to Chelsea in the winter, just 18 years old at 4. In your top 3 are Tyus Magno, Thiago Almada, and Jesus Ferreira. Doyle, what do you make of the list overall? And while we're looking at who made it, it's sometimes who didn't make it that's just as incredible. And John Duran's not on this list. He's with the Colombian national team
right
now.
He broke out a little bit too late. I think a little bit after the voting. But if you look at, if there's anybody who could be sold for 8 figures after next season, it might be John Duran. And his teammate Brian Gutierrez. He 19-year-old. He just signed a new contract that'll keep him in Chicago through 2026. He's been fantastic as well. Caden Clark was in the top 10 last year, and he has a big future. He hasn't played as well this year, so just potential alone isn't enough. You have to be productive. He has dropped out of this list, so it's wild. Tavon Gray last year became the youngest starter in MLS Cup history. And he's played almost 2,000 minutes this year. You would think he would be a shoe-in. He's not on this list, and it's understandable. It's justifiable. There's just so much more talent now at a young age getting on the field. It is really, really good to see. And I think the smarter teams are learning a way to sort of get that conveyor belt moving even faster, because the more good young players that you develop, the better your team's going to be, and the more you can sell. And that is a big part of what MLS's future is.
All right, let's jump into the list itself and get to the 10 that we're counting down today for you. A reminder, of course, get the full list analysis, MLSsoccer.com or the MLS app. We start at number 20 with Mr. Jayden Nelson, Doyle, and I know he has a special place in your heart this year. Has really broken out, a midfielder that has more than maybe I expected him to show this year.
Yeah, you said it, a midfielder, and that was the key, right? Because it looks like Bob Bradley's going to end up doing with Jayden Nelson what he did with Latif Blessing a couple of years ago. Remember, Latif was an energetic but not all that productive winger for Sporting Kansas City. He went to LAFC. Bob turned him into a ball-winning central midfielder, kind of almost like a fake number 10, and Latif took off. And the same thing, it looks like is happening with Jayden Nelson, because he was a ball stopper on the wing. You could see from his athleticism, his skill on the ball, you understand why people see him as a winger. But then if you watch him play recently as a central midfielder for Toronto, he glides by guys. He's always trying to play through the lines, and he wins the ball. So it's like this, this evolutionary Latif Blessing kind of role that I think Jayden Nelson is going to end up being made for. Now, he hasn't been that productive yet, right? He's a guy who's played minutes, but he hasn't necessarily turned it into box score stats. And it's not entirely clear that he's going to be a starter next year. But I think if you look at how gifted he is, I honestly think there's almost no ceiling with this kid.
Latif is maybe the guy on the transition side from winger to midfield. I think another comparison to stay at LAFC and with Bob is Mark Anthony Kaye, his teammate now, who was just sort of who's a little bit maybe wasn't ready in every way, tactically and technically, for the moment he was put into by Bob, but you could see on the training field every day and throughout games just made huge progress. Sort of that hands-on attention that he got, and Nelson is the next one to get that. And being around the players in that midfield that they have in Toronto as well as the attack, you would think that his progression will only continue. And he is one of many Canadian youth national teamers, soon to be full national teamers, that are sort of in this conversation in 22 under 22. And that's got to be hugely encouraging for Canada as they enter what they hope is a golden era.
Yeah, for Canada, I mean, if you look at the amount of talent that's come out of Toronto, it just Toronto alone, it's pretty incredible. And Bob Bradley has, I think, a better history of playing and developing good young players than any other coach in MLS. So you put those two things together, and then you add in what Wilfred Nancy is doing up in Montreal, and it looks pretty good for Canada's national team, for that pipeline to continue producing players who can step up from the youth ranks to MLS into the international scene. It's really, really encouraging. And as you mentioned, Jaquil Marshall-Rutty, he's maybe next in line, right? He made this list at the tail end. I think he was 22nd on the list. He's a couple years younger than Jayden Nelson. He was considered actually a bigger prospect than Jayden Nelson. So you can see what I mean about the conveyor belt, the ability to sort of consistently produce guys who can make the leap and be impactful players. It helps not just the club and not just the league. Obviously, it helps these national teams a ton.
19 years old, number 20 on this list, Jayden Nelson. Seems to, we have listed as forward. That's what he was. It seems like midfield is probably where he's headed. We'll see what the rest of 2022 and 2023 bring. That is the rallying cry for the Crew, but we're not here to talk about their overall fortunes with Jordan Angeli, who you hear on those broadcasts, killing it every single week. We're here to talk about Aidan Morris. Jordan, when you think back to that MLS Cup victory, and that was sort of the coming out party, and then an untimely injury, maybe delayed development a little bit, but we're looking at maybe one of the best sixes in the league as far as prospects go. And depending on the day, I'd say just overall sixes. He's performed that well at times for this Crew team.
I think you're absolutely right. And sometimes our most difficult moments can turn out to be the moments that really define us the most. And we saw what Aidan Morris could do in that game that you were talking about in MLS Cup. But what was he able to do in that year when he was away from the field? That's the biggest part. And I think he learned so much about positioning, and he's a student of the game. I've talked to him many times about how much football he watches and how much information he's gleaning from one of the best sixes to ever do it in MLS, Darlington Nagbe, every single day. I do think the timing of the injury, although unfortunate, it might have been one of the best things to happen to Aidan, because his full understanding of the game, I think he really was able to wrap his brain around how effective he truly could be within this team. And he's been showing that.
Jordan, for those who don't watch a ton of the Crew, is there a player comparison? Like, is he more of a Dax McCarty type of midfielder who likes to control possession with short passes, or is he a Diego Chara type who's always running around the entire field, it seems, and winning the ball and starting counterattacks? Like, where does he fall in the spectrum of great MLS defensive midfielders that we've seen?
I think he takes little bits of, I think he's going to be one of those players that we're going to compare other people to, but I don't think he's any of those people. I think he has the range when it comes to defensive work that Diego Chara has, because he is all over the field. I remember about 2 months ago, there was a game, I believe it was the Toronto game, and I asked Caleb how much Aidan ran during the game, like what was his metrics. And he said Aidan ran more in the first half of the game than some players did in the entire game. That's how much ground this kid can cover. And people recognize that. People in the stands, I have friends that come to the games and they're like, okay, we were just cheering for Morris because he was everywhere. And so he has a little bit of that Chara in him, right? The ability to cover ground. But I also think that he is starting to develop, and I think that his decision-making in these moments, he knows that he has the long range and he can really open and stretch the field. I don't think he always picks the right times to do it or the right pass to do it. But he also is going to be a 6 who can unlock a defense through just long stretching balls, big diagonals. So he has a lot of variability in his game, and it's hard to compare him to one person. But I do think playing with Darlington so much has developed that side of his game, the small, little, intricate passes to be able to get out of pressure a little bit better.
If he came to you and said, what do I have to do? What do you think I have to do, Jordan, to make the jump to become a U.S. national team player? What would you tell him to focus on over the next 6 months?
I would tell him to focus on that, what I was saying, not always the long range passes, but pass completion, to make sure that when he gets the ball, he keeps it every single time. Because defensively, he always seems to me like he's in the right place, or he can get to the right place in the proper time. So, I would say just retention of the ball, because it's not far off, Doyle. It really isn't. But I do think that there are little moments where he could pull defenders in a little bit more before he decides to pick out an opposing space on the other side of the field, or he can find himself on the half turn a little bit better in moments to break an entire line with his first touch and then be able to progress the ball. So that ball retention going forward, I think, can really help him knock on the door there of the national team.
Before we let you go, Jordan, it sounds like you've spent a good time with him. Give us a better idea of who he is as a person. I think it's easy for people to get focused in on, these little intricate moments within the game, and those obviously matter an awful lot. But as far as success through the rest of his career, who he is as a person is sometimes just as important. What do you get from him as far as vibes, as far as his personality and his drive? Where does he want to go?
He's a very driven person, and I think we saw that the moment that he really splashed onto the scene in MLS Cup is he has this desire about him to be the best that he can be, and there's no doubt in my mind that he wants to be on the national team. He wants to be one of the best midfielders that this league has ever seen, or potentially go abroad. He's a cool guy. I want to say kid because he is. All these guys that we're talking about are kids. He's 20 years old. He carries himself older than his age because he has, matured a lot over these last couple of years with the trials that he has endured. But he's a cool kid. He just loves the game. One of my favorite things about being at the games early that a lot of people don't get to see is his work before he goes out on the field. He'll walk in and they, drop their stuff out in the locker room. And Aidan goes out on the field and he practices, like visualizes and goes through certain motions that he feels like are going to help him. And that little insight into him visualizing and running the game through his mind before he even starts, I think is a big reason why the Crew don't lose games when he starts the game. Only one loss when he starts. And he just has a great mind about him, a good desire. And I really do think there's, a high floor for him and a really, the ceiling is out there because he can continue to develop, and I think he will.
We have not seen the best of Aidan Morris. We have not seen the best of Jordan Angeli. Always have a great time chatting with you, Jordan, about the game. Thank you so much for rolling through today.
Thanks for having me, you guys.
Of course. All right, let's keep this thing going. We're going to make a big jump on the list from number 19, Aidan Morris, all the way down to number 11, Cade Cowell of the San Jose Earthquakes. So this has been maybe not the linear progression that we wanted and expected from Cade Cowell, but as you see some of his highlights here on YouTube and just think about where he's been and where he's going, he is 18 years old. He's 18 years old. That is still mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, he's 18 years old, and he has almost 100 games of pro experience. I think about 80, 85 of them in MLS. As you said, it hasn't been linear progression. He's not clearly better this year than he was last year. I think there were some frustrations from him early in the season, but part of developing as a player is developing the mental side. And we saw that from Jesus Ferreira, who topped this list, right? In 2020, he had 1 goal. And that was coming off a very good season. He did not put the ball in the net. He wasn't as good a playmaker as he had been. He really struggled. Now he bounced back from that with a very good year last year, and obviously basically a record-setting year this year. Cade Cowell is 18. He's younger than Ferreira was 2 years ago. So he's having his down year as an 18-year-old, and he's still showing in these moments the ability to be what I would consider like a Jordan Morris level force going forward in transition, a guy who's able to finish plays off either with the final ball or by getting into the box and, putting the ball in the net himself. What Jordan Morris did, though, when he came into the league, he was limited. Every year he improved. Now, Cade Cowell has the ability to be, I think, a better player than Jordan Morris was at his best. But he has to, learn from this year, learn from the down moments just as much as you learn from the high moments, and come back next year. I want to see him, better able to head the ball. I want to see his decision making faster in possession. Right? It can't just be a transition player. And the big thing is, given his speed, and as per Second Spectrum, he is the fastest player in MLS. Given his speed, I want to see him constantly putting the fear of God into opposing back lines, the ability to run in behind, even when it's just in possession, right? It doesn't have to be only when there's a transition moment. Think of a guy who, is a couple spots higher in this list, Kwadwo Opoku. Opoku plays for a team that has 55% possession, but he's always getting behind the back line. He's always sniffing that out. Cade Cowell can do that. If he does that, we're talking about a guy who could end up being number 1 on this list a year from now and get sold for 8 figures. That's the type of talent he is.
He already had interest from League One in this summer. San Jose holding on. San Jose also having a big change coming. Luchi Gonzalez is going to arrive. After spending some time with Greg Berhalter and developing as a coach, and with J-Bo in front of him to feed, it seems like Cade Cowell could be on the brink of something big. 5 goals, 6 assists last year as a 17-year-old. 2 goals, 5 assists this year with some turmoil in San Jose. Hopefully next year will be a big jump forward for Cade Cowell. He is number 11 on this list, young forward for the San Jose Earthquakes. Let's keep it moving and go on to number 10 on our list. That's Jack McGlynn. We've also skipped over Paxton Aronson, and Danny Higginbotham is here. He watches these guys every single week. And Danny, Jack McGlynn's entry into the lineup for the Union really made a difference. Let's say, what do you make of this young man?
He's been incredible. I think when you watch him, one of the things that stands out is that you can't believe he's only 19. He plays like he's 29. He has the ability, and I've seen it on numerous occasions this season, to speed the game up, to slow it down, dependent on what the game requires. And I'm not at all putting him in the same bracket as this player I'm going to mention, but he's very similar as in terms of how he can make the pitch look huge. He can always create time and space for himself, and that was Paul Scholes. Paul Scholes himself as a player, you would play against him and you would think, okay, you're going to get tight to him, you're going to push up against him, but he always managed to find space. And that's because he was always on the half turn. And that's something that I find that Jack McGlynn has. He has so many attributes that I don't think you can teach. The natural ability, the ability to pick the ball up facing the opposition goal, the ability to always pick the right pass. Might not be the easiest pass, but it's the correct one. And, I've spoke to Jim Curtin about him on numerous occasions, and he said that he's arguably the most gifted player that he's worked with is in terms of his technical ability. And he's just a joy to watch. And at times you just have to take a little bit of a step back and remember his age, because I do honestly believe the club that he's at the moment, the environment where he can flourish, the likes of Bedoya Blake, Elliot Glesnes, experienced players like that around him, he can flourish. And, if he carries on going the way that he's going, then, he is going to be a top class player.
So, Danny, you said he's got a lot of the stuff that you can't teach, and I completely agree with that. He makes soccer look easy, which is such a gift. But what of the stuff that you can teach? If you were to sit down with him and say, okay, we're going to work on this over the winter, what would you sit down with Jack McGlynn and start working on?
I think it's a continuation of everything that he has. There's nothing really when I look at his game at the moment, and this is where I think the coaching team have been very good, been very clever at Philadelphia Union. They've picked the right games for him to play in. And I think it's just a case of everything that he has now, just to improve on it. Maybe the physical aspects, he's still a youngster, he's still growing into his body. But I just think all in all is to continue to do the things that he's doing. And, I think when you look at the appearances that he's had this season, I think he's had 7 starts, they've won 6 and drawn 1. That's nothing to do with Jack McGlynn ability-wise, and the same goes for the other younger players. It's just that this team is on an incredible run that I don't think anybody saw coming. And it's very difficult then to take players out of the team. So when Jack's come into the team, he has flourished. But I also think from a manager's side of things, you have to know when to take a player out of the team as well. Because youngsters, it's all about how they're managed. It's great to say that, players are playing on a consistent basis week in, week out, but at a younger age, you have to be known. It has to be known for when they need to be taken out. So when you look at what he needs to improve in, I think it's just the whole package, really. There's not a particular area that I look at him and think, oh, this is really weak, this will take him to the next level. It's just a continuation of his education of the game. And I think if it continues to go that way, then, like I say, I think Philadelphia Union have got another top-class player on their hands.
The rumor, the reporting that we heard from this summer was that PSV are monitoring him. PSV, of course, one of the top clubs in the Eredivisie, perennial Champions League club. It seems to me like that would be a good next step if somebody were to come in this winter or next summer and make a bid for Jack McGlynn, being a centerpiece for a team that's going to control the ball more often than not.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think that's the type of team that he would be suited to. But I think one of the things is you talk about taking a youngster out of a team, putting them into the team. It's also about knowing when is the time for them to move. And the one thing I think we've seen with Union over the years, with the younger players have moved on, they've made sure that it's been the right club for them. And I think with someone like Jack McGlynn, yes, he's going to get all this attention. He's going to create a lot of interest from some of the big clubs in Europe. But the thing that I would say, and I would say the same for any younger players really in MLS at the moment, is don't be in a rush. Don't be in a rush to move, because if you are in that position and it's like, okay, well, do I go now because this club's coming or because this club's accepted an offer X, Y, and Z, then that can be of detriment to you as much as it can be good for you. And I just feel that the environment of the league, environment of his surroundings week in, week out, he can still improve so much as in terms of doing what he's doing now in the league that he's in and the club that he's at. But without question, you mentioned PSV, the way that they play. I think when you look at teams, he's that player he's not necessarily a defensive midfielder, your last line of midfield before you get to the defence. He works so well and so advantageously when he's got a player like Martinez next to him. Mm-hmm. We know Martinez is one of the best defensive midfielders in MLS. He will do a lot of that dirty work. So that means that Jack McGlynn, he can be in a position where, yes, he does the defensive side, but a lot of the time when he picks the ball up, he has the ability to then kick his head up, look for the pass. He'll have runners going in front of him rather than just making that last-ditch tackle and then being pressed straight away. So I think he's in a really good place at the moment. And like I say, I think there'll be a number of top clubs in Europe that will be looking for his services in the future just because of what he brings to anybody's midfield.
So he's number 10 on this list, Danny, but number 12 is Paxton Aronson. We did not hit him, and I don't know if this year has been a step back necessarily for Paxton. Had such a huge role at that CONCACAF championship, but it's less goals, less minutes played, fewer starts. What have you made of this year of development for Paxton and Philly?
I think obviously I'm sure he would have liked to have got more game time, but it goes back to what I was saying previously, is that this team is on a roll at the moment. And, I think if the team wasn't doing so well, then you would have seen more minutes for the younger players. It's obvious that Jim Curtin and his coaching staff, they trust the younger players because they've started important games and they've also come on in important times in the game as well. But I think when a team's doing so well, people talk about rotation. I don't agree with rotation. Myself, as a former player, when you're winning every week, you never feel tired. You come off the pitch after you've just won 5-0, 6-0, the results that Philadelphia Union have had. You don't feel tired. You want to play the next day. So I think as in terms of the younger players, they will get their game time. But at the moment, because the team's doing so well, it's very difficult for them to be getting consistent game time. But what they are doing, they're getting the experiences of coming in to close games off. They've been coming in when the games have been quite close at certain circumstances. And I think with Paxton Aaronson as well, I think what we've seen with him is that, he is a very good player in that number 10 position. I think we've seen a lot more coming off the bench from him so far, but he has the ability, the pressing ability, just like his brother, the ability to pick the pass. And what I like about the young players, and this probably goes for, not just McGlynn, not just Aaronson, but the likes of Sullivan. You've obviously got Harriel, who's come in there as well. Flock, who, I don't think he gets the credit that he deserves, because I think the way that he plays, he looks as though he is about 26, 27 because he's so far advanced. But these players, when they come onto the pitch, they're not just looking for that easy pass. They're looking to be difference makers. And when the likes of Aaronson have come on the pitch, they've got involved, whether it be assists, whether it be part of a play that's leading to a goal. And that's all because the confidence and the belief that everybody around them has got in them, including the players, the coaching staff. So I think it's where people may look at it and go, okay, well, the game time's not been as great. That doesn't mean that they've moved backwards. It just means that this is a difficult team to get into, and it's very difficult for Jim Kern to change the team when they're doing so well and scoring so many goals and breaking so many records.
3 Union players on this 22 under 22 list. They've been all over this list in the past. You expect more to come, and these guys to rise as well if they manage to stick around MLS. Danny Higginbotham calling those games every single week. Danny, appreciate your time, man. Thank you for the expertise.
Pleasure as always.
All right, let's keep it going. Number 8, Ismael Kone, Club de Foot, Montreal. What an explosion, Doyle.
Yeah.
I mean, I was talking to Patrice Bernier, and he was like, look, last year, this guy was an amateur. He was pretty much unknown. He got signed at the end of the year. He did not play a minute last year in MLS, Ismael Kone.
Yeah.
This year, he has looked, I mean, easily above league average. At times, there are moments that aren't as good for him. He's a 19-year-old. He has been absolutely spectacular. So spectacular that he's pushed his way to the Canadian national team. We know the status they have, the year that they've had, 2-3 years to be honest about that one, as well as getting multi-million-dollar bids and interest from overseas. It's an incredible rise. There's no other way to put it.
It's an incredible rise. It is kind of an out of the blue story. Like, you had to be a real Canadian youth soccer sicko to know about this kid a year and a half ago. And now, as you said, he could be on the plane to Qatar. I wouldn't be surprised if he made that final roster for Canada, because he's that kind of talent. And the biggest thing about him is he plays with a type of fearlessness that it's just wonderful to see. And the way it manifests itself with Kone is not necessarily the on-the-ball stuff. I'll compare him to another Canadian central midfielder that we talked about in Jayden Nelson. Jayden Nelson's fearlessness is he wants to nutmeg everybody that he sees, which is great, and I love him for it. But Ismael Kone is less about the on-the-ball stuff and more about really dynamic movement off the ball. He makes these really, you don't expect him kind of runs out of central midfield to become a third man runner and to put the ball in the back of the net, or to get into the primary assist zone on the side of the box and hit these pullbacks. And that's your number 8 doing that. It's a level of it's off ball sophistication. There's a type of stuff that you don't see from a lot of kids in any league. And it's one of the reasons why kids don't play, because they don't create these dynamic moments off the ball. So Wilfred Nancy was able to take Kone, and whether it was part of something the kid had innately or something that they coached him up on this off season, but he's able to take him and drop him into that midfield next to guys like Victor Wanyama, who's such a great pro, one of the best D mids in the league, and Sam Piet, another guy who's a veteran who's probably going to be going to Qatar. Drop Kone in with those guys, sometimes in place of those guys, and he's, in certain aspects of the game, he's been an upgrade. He's given Montreal this ability to unbalance teams from a spot where teams usually aren't unbalanced. It's been fantastic, and on top of all that, you can see him getting better with the ball basically every time he plays. And on top of that, he checks basically every box that you can want athletically, right? He's getting interest from teams in the Premier League and the English Championship, which like you have to check those boxes if you're going to play. I think, he's another guy who we've talked about on this show who it could top this list next year if he's still in MLS, because he is the type of guy where if he goes to Qatar and the right offer comes in after that, it might be an offer that Joey Saputo and that ownership group can't refuse, because he is that type of talent.
What you hope for all these players, and almost all of these are going to have European teams scouting them. Many have already had offers put in, whether they've been rejected or otherwise. In the case of some, accepted in Gaga Slonina's case. What you would just hope is that they find the right next step, as Danny was sort of saying, and that they don't necessarily hurry, but you can see from the likes of Brendan Aronson and others, like how much it matters to take the steps at the right moments to progress at the right pace. And it may be for some players that pace is much faster. One of the things that has to be super attractive about Kone is that he got dropped into an environment he wasn't accustomed to and immediately not just survived, but thrived. And that's what teams down the line are going to be looking for. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talk about a guy like Victor Wanyama next to him, not just in game, but outside of games, to help him understand what it's going to take to hit that next level, where he is succeeding and why, but also maybe where he's deficient. But Ismael Kone, he's got a huge role to play. Forget about a possible transfer. Forget about Qatar for a second. I mean, a huge role to play in the playoff push that Montreal are going to have. They are arguably one of the three best teams in the league with Philly and LAFC. They've got an opportunity here to make some history, and Kone is going to be right in the middle of it. All right, let's go to our own Tommy Scoops. Tommy, I've invited you to speak. Please request. We will invite you in to talk about the number 6 player on this list, a player who is near and dear to your heart, John Tolkin of the New York Red Bulls. He of the mini tattoos, he of the bright and effervescent personality, he of the changing hairstyles, he who has a very technical, tactical, and physical game that goes beyond his years of 20. One of the best left backs in this league, Tom. Is he ranked high enough in your opinion?
What's going on?
And also, what are you eating? What are you eating? It sounds like you're banging around a kitchen.
Sounds like I'm
right
put
now.
down a coffee mug. I'm trying to be at the top of my game for you guys here, man. Like I'm just trying to do the best for the boys.
Just checking. I always want to see what you're up to, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Is John Tolkin high enough? I'm going to be biased from the New Jersey connection, from me jokingly calling him my, large adult son, or small adult son. I usually say that about NBA players. He should be the top fullback on this list for me. Like I he's proven so much over 2 years of being a starting left back for the Red Bulls. I think that he's going to be somebody who's perfect for the way that Aronson went to Salzburg. I think a high-pressing club is going to be the team that signs him in Europe at some point. They'd be smart to, whichever, whether that's within the Red Bull system or not. And I think he's just going to excel and thrive because he's somebody who so clearly is ready to play in this system at a higher level.
Tom, what got him on the field at left wing back for the Red Bulls? Because, through his youth years, talking to a lot of people, they thought that he was going to end up being a D-mid. They thought he was going to end up being a number 6. But now we're talking about him maybe going to a Champions League team as a left wing back. He's one of the best left wing backs or fullbacks in MLS. He looks at home there. So what switch was flipped for him that made it obvious that this is his position?
He played a little bit of both in USL with the Red Bulls too, even before he signed his homegrown contract, and it just became clear he had more of an impact at left back. Came into preseason, like he still could have played both. He has played a little bit of center mid in MLS when the Red Bulls had Andrew Gutman, but even like this year, like look at the Red Bulls roster. If he picked up an injury, they had nobody else at left back. Like it's not only just that he's playing well, it's just that he's being able to play it all, and he's been so awesome. He's been one of their unsung heroes just because the backup plan there at left back is pretty non-existent. They truly believed in this kid, and they saw his ceiling, just all of his kind of physical attributes that make him such a high level left back. Maybe he would be just a pretty good center mid, right? Like nobody grows up dreaming to be a fullback for the most part. So a lot of these kids are converted wingers or converted from other positions that end up playing fullback the highest level.
So obviously he would fit as a left back for Greg Berhalter's national team. Assuming Berhalter is still the coach next year. You got to imagine that Tolkin would be brought in for the first camp after the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. He's somebody who should be pushing for the envelope right now. Like he's got to be of the next wave of young left backs, like Kevin Paredes as well. But like, John Tolkin is playing every game for the Red Bulls. One of the things I wrote around 22 coming out, and I know that there's about 400 features from the three of us, from Joe, Larry, from everybody else, Charlie Boehm. I hope that you guys all are able to read all of these. It's a lot of reading materials. One of the things I wrote is I talked to a number of like GMs and scouts anonymously to ask them, hey, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? All this stuff. After talking about Jesus Ferreira and Thiago Almada for obvious reasons as 1 and 2 or wherever Almada finished, John Tolkin was one of the guys that if you gave an open-ended question, they came back and talking about John Tolkin. Here are a couple quotes I got. Out of all of these guys on this list, I had the hardest time to put Tolkin. I think he's a future star for the national team. Not only does Tolkin try stuff, like Bruce Arena said of Clint Dempsey, he's got this chip on his shoulder. He doesn't care who he's playing. And then someone else said, I love Tolkin. He's very good. He's got a great engine, all the tools going forward. To be honest, I underrated him when I saw him in the USL, but he really developed. So this is a kid that, like, I didn't hear a bad word about him.
What comes next for him? Not just national team, but I'm thinking about like a Sam Vines, who is now in the top team in Belgium, starting every single game. I mean, John Tolkin, we talk about Salzburg, we talk about clubs of that ilk. I mean, have you heard any transfer rumblings around him? Is something imminent, or is it sort of a wait and see situation?
I don't have any like inside knowledge on this, but like my expectation is that there would be a move in the winter. Like, what else can he prove at this level? He's obviously a known commodity to a bunch of teams in Europe. Again, I can't say it with certainty. All of these things are fluid. Nobody really knows. But like, if I had to guess right now, if he's staying or going in the winter, I'd say he's going.
Tom, last question.
Yeah,
last question. Should he bring back the mullet?
Yes.
Obviously. Like, if anybody who says no is a narc. I remember being upset when he cut it. Like, come on, man. Like, that's got to be all part of the brand. Like, you know how I look stupid with the mustache? Like, yeah, obviously, like a crew cut probably looks better if he's, just in normal life. But man, like that mullet is a brand that'll carry you far. Like, I need to get on this kid as a brand manager.
Just as a consultant, get in there, Tom. Get in there. Follow him on Twitter.
One day if I do.
Maybe. Yeah, if he hires you, there's no doubt about it. Follow Tom on Twitter. Tom Bogert 6 minutes ago tweeting a story about the union among the clubs interested in Louisville City's young center back Josh Winder. So go check that out. Always great reporting from Tom. All over the place. MLSsoccer.com, Twitter, etc. Thank you, Tom, for talking about your young adult son. I don't even
large adult.
Whichever one it is, man. Whichever one it is. All right, let's talk about number 4 on this list. That's Gaga Slonina. He's on his way to Chelsea in the winter for many millions of dollars. Tony Meola is with us.
Guy who knows a thing or two about mullets.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Tony, I'm gonna unmute yourself, my man, and jump in with us.
What's up,
there
boys?
There you are. You said you weren't sure that you were getting Twitter Spaces working, Tony, but you've been all over it.
Well, it's cut out on me like 6 times already. So I'm doing this is not user friendly for a guy like me, but I'm good, man. I'm happy to be here talking about one of the most important things in all of Major League Soccer, and that's mullets. Let's roll.
Well, first of all, I think we know your stance on young Tolkin's mullet. Bring it back. I don't think Gaga's going to go mullet. Maybe if he was born a little bit earlier and playing in the 80s, he would have been right there with it. But he's playing in this era, and he's 18 years old and doing the things that he's doing. From just a goalkeeping perspective, give us your scouting report. Nitty-gritty.
Yeah, he's a kid that's got all the tools. When I look at his game, he's got a little bit of everything. He also has a little bit of improvement. I should say a lot of bit of improvement, if you will, in everything that he does. But the one thing that sticks out, if anything, is his shot-stopping ability. He's a kid with a big frame. I think he's about 6'4", and he's become more explosive. Remember, this kid came into the league last year, so we're about a year and a half into watching Gaga Slonina. But I had seen him because I've been calling the games for 3 years now for the Fire, and I kind of seen him develop. And the one thing that you can tell, he's growing into his man body now. He's getting stronger. He's a little bit more explosive. But from a shot-stopping standpoint, I think that's his number one gift right now. Now, with that said, there's clearly he's an 18-year-old kid, and I think the one thing the Fire have done really well with him, and credit last year to Rafa Wicki, and then, of course, Frankie Klopas, who took over at one point, and then Ezra Hendrickson clearly has carried that on. is they've given a young kid an opportunity. I heard Danny Higginbotham a little bit ago talking about all the youngsters in Philly, and I heard Jordan talking about Aidan Morris in Columbus. You got to give these guys an opportunity, and in a position like goalkeeper, where oftentimes you're standing on an island, you have to live with mistakes, and I think the Fire did that, because there was a moment during the season. I want to tell you it was May. I could be off by a couple of weeks, but he had a poor run of games, and it was all around him making this decision, which I never really thought was that tough a decision for him, to choose Poland or choose the U.S. I'm sure it was tough, but I should have said I don't think there was any question that he was going to choose the U.S. He struggled a little bit, and you guys know, you've been around the game forever, and there's been guys that have had poor form, and you come back and realize something was going on in their life that maybe wasn't perfect. These are all things that are new to him, but I'm happy that the Fire have stuck with him through all of that, and it's been fun for me. Obviously, it's a position that I hold near and dear to my heart, to watch this kid develop.
Yeah. It's been fun to watch him develop. A big part of that, especially I think during the tough moments like the ones you were describing, is mental. And one of the things that I've heard from everybody affiliated with the Fire is that the kid's just mature beyond his years. He doesn't let it get to him when those bad moments come, and then he doesn't get too high when the good moments come.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on for Gaga and what it's been so far. And I think there's as a young goalkeeper, right? You have to, I suppose, as a young player in general, you just kind of have to go through all the mistakes, right? Like, everything that can go wrong kind of has to go wrong, so you feel it. And there's going to be mistakes in his game. There's going to be moments where he stands on his head and he's brilliant because he's got that much talent. And the brilliant games are going to far outweigh the mistakes. But I think we just need to be patient with him. This move for me to Chelsea is really, really interesting, because his development has come by playing first-team football.
Yeah.
And he's now played first-team football. I'm going to guess, I don't have the numbers in front of me. You guys probably do. But he's got to be in and around 40 or 50 games now in the last year and a half, right? So can that come to a halt next year if they don't send him on loan someplace? I'm really interested to see, because, again, I think if he doesn't get a full run of games someplace, I don't care if he goes to the Netherlands or he goes to Portugal or he goes wherever Chelsea decides to send him, he needs to play all the time. Clearly, he's not going to play right now at Chelsea, but I don't know that he's that far off of playing first-team football in the Premier League. When I say that, I mean like in the next 3 years or so, because there's still a lot of developing to do. But he certainly has, as much as we've seen in this league, especially from a young American goalkeeper, he has just about every tool that you can ask for. Now he's just got to refine everything and continue to do that for the next 20 years.
20 years, man. Goalkeeper careers can go on and on and on. 43 starts, Tony. 3,800 minutes or so. Do you think there's any possibility he could get loaned back to Chicago? Or is there another homegrown goalkeeper on the back end and Chris Brady saying, hold on, this is about to be my job?
Yeah, I'm not sure Chris Brady is ready, if I'm being honest with you right now. I saw him in the under-20s, and I would have thought – I think he's going to be good. I think he's not going to develop as early as Gaga has. But, again, if you do give him an opportunity, you've got to live with mistakes, right? But to your question, I think it would be a great move if Gaga Slonina still continues to play at the Fire. Now he's going to go to Chelsea here sometime in, I don't know, October, November. He's going to train. He's going to go and do whatever he can do leading up to that point. And if he doesn't find a club to get loaned to, clearly he has a home in Chicago that he's comfortable with. I will say this. He was hell-bent this year, and it didn't happen now for a second year in a row with him. It's 5 years in a row for the Chicago Fire. He was hell-bent on trying to be the guy that put them in the playoffs. So when you think about it from that perspective, a competitive perspective, he may want to come back and do that because he hasn't experienced that so far. There's a lot of great things ahead for Gaga Slonina. I'm really excited to see where it all ends up. But I think this is a guy we'll see with the national team immediately after the World Cup. I heard you guys talking about Tolkin, kind of same sort of time frame, right? And where you get to, what's next in their careers. I think he'll be there. If people have asked me, should he be on the World Cup roster this time around? So two things went against him for me. That period in May when, I believe it was May, he had that bad stretch. That was just before Greg Berhalter was calling guys in for a camp, right? So Greg talked about it. It's not a good stretch for him. So he misses that opportunity. And I also think the fact that Zach Steffen and Matt Turner are in the positions they're in. Now, Zach's been playing a little bit more, but now he's injured. If those guys were starting goalkeepers on their, if they were in MLS or if they were in the Premier League or the Championship, if they were full-time starting goalkeepers and both playing really well, I think you take a young goalkeeper. But because you kind of have this sort of uncertainty in goal, I think Gaga probably misses out this time to a guy like Sean Johnson who's playing every week, or a guy like Ethan Horvath who's playing every week, somebody like that.
We could talk to you about John Duran on this as well, but he was, for me, the biggest snub on this list that Duran did not make it. He maybe had his hot streak a little bit late, but he's going to be a huge player. Tony, thank you so much for joining us, lending your longtime expertise to the art of goalkeeping to Gaga Slonina's place at number 4 on 22 under 22.
All right, boys. Appreciate it. Big hug. Keep up the good work, man. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
All right. Thanks, Tony. Let's keep it going, Doyle. We're going to hit the top 3 real quick. Tyus Magno, NYCFC, is number 3. He's got 6 goals, 8 assists this year. He is not the same player as Tati Castellanos. They're different in a lot of ways, but their trajectory is a little bit similar with NYCFC, if not their profile to start. I mean, Tati was way further under the radar than Magno was. Magno's a huge transfer fee out of Brazil, had a big profile. His value sort of dipped. NYCFC and the City Football Group were ready, came in, snatched him up, started him out on the wing. First year was a transition year. This year, he's really started to produce, and it feels like there's a decent possibility that next year he'll go from the wing to center forward, or at the very least, the double-digit goal scorer. What have you made of his time in MLS so far?
Yeah, they're kind of doing that, but it's inverse from Tati, because Tati played on the wing, and he really wasn't that effective. You could see why Dome Torrent decided he wanted Tati on the wing, but Tati became Tati when Ronnie Dyla said, actually, no, this guy's got to be our center forward. And partially that was just, a bad break on Eber's part. Eber got injured. They didn't have anybody else who could play center forward. They put Tati there as a number 9, and he became Tati, all action number 9, who best defensive center forward that we've ever had in the league, and amazing at sniffing out chances, makes a million runs. Tyus Magno looked really good on the wing, right? He looked like, I was texting with an MLS coach this year, an Eastern Conference coach this year, and I sent him a text out of the blue. I was like, is Tyus Magno already the best winger in MLS? And he said, yeah, it's not actually that close. And since then, they've actually had to play him at center forward a bit, and it's been a learning curve. And you could see it that while he's a natural at doing false 9 things, he wants to come back to the ball and kind of orchestrate a little bit. He doesn't make a ton of goal scoring runs when he's a center forward, and he's not the same type of defensive presence that Tati was up there. So I hope what happens for NYCFC this offseason is they decide to move him back out onto the wing, because they paid $8-9 million for him. He looked like an $8 or $9 million winger as a 19-year-old. And I think they could develop him into a $25 million winger by the time he's 21 or 22, because he has that type of talent. He glides by guys when he's on the ball, but even better than that is just he's so smart and lethal when he's combining in and around the box. He's like the ideal goal-scoring winger for any team that's going to be front foot, possession heavy, dominant with the ball type of team. And it's why he was putting up such big numbers when he was playing off of Tati Castellanos. These two guys were able to make each other better. And as a 19, 20-year-old, that shows me that he's not just a talent, but he's a guy who can think the game as well.
I just want to say, Tati had 11 and 7 the year that Eber had 15 goals. I'm just throwing it out there. He's pretty effective as a winger too.
Fair.
If also a little, a little bit wasteful at times, as he still was up top. But this guy's next in line. NYCFC, they've got an absolute conveyor belt of talent in this range, this age range. Also on this list this year, I believe, is Thiago Andrade. I mean, I think Santi Moreno might have aged out in 2022.
Gabi Ferreira. I think I had Gabi Ferreira in my top 15. He's been really something.
I did too, and I was a little bit shocked not to see him on the list. But NYCFC, FC Dallas, the likes of Philly, multiple players on this list really holding things down. Let's keep it going. Number 2 here, we have Felipe Cardenas to join us to talk Thiago Almada. No big deal. He's just with the Argentine national team. Right now, Felipe, I've sent you an invite to speak, man. Invite yourself in, and we'll chat about this. 21 years old. He's got the highest quote-unquote transfer value on this list, Doyle. It helps to be an Argentine international. Felipe, tell us about what Thiago's doing right now, what 2021 was for him, and what the future could hold.
Hey, guys. Yeah, happy to be here. I mean, Thiago Almada, just obviously, this is not like breaking news. He's a very good player. I think his story is interesting, though, for just, there were serious concerns when he was signed by Atlanta United. He was implicated in a sexual abuse accusation. Darren Eales told me in February when I had an interview with him that they had to wait until that investigation was completed before they signed him. Almada was cleared. He was never charged. And, then I thought what was tough for him is that was the first thing he had to address when he was put in front of the reporters when he made his way to the United States. So that was the beginning for him. And I think another thing that was a challenge was just, playing under the current situation in Atlanta United, the injuries, like the responsibility on him with the big transfer fee, the fact that, he didn't know his coach. And I understand that when you travel abroad, when you're transferred abroad, you don't typically know the coach you're going to play for. But there was an opportunity. There was a possibility that he would be playing under Gabriel Heinze at one point. Heinze gave him his professional debut in Argentina at MLS Stars field. So it's not like, he's had to overcome a lot of things, but it was a bit of a stop-start for him. Ever since then, I think the best thing that I can say about Thiago Almada is that he's a high IQ player. He understands the game very well. He rarely looks uncomfortable in possession. And there are times where, he's receiving the ball around his own penalty area, like from a center back under pressure, and he just calmly plays out of it with one touch. And I think those touches are overlooked because we're seeing the goals, we're seeing, the tight footwork, the tight control. But for me, he can play in pretty much any system, and he's proving that here in Atlanta. So, just a top quality young player. I think those in Argentina knew that. That's why they're already claiming and clamoring, like, get him out of MLS as soon as possible. He should be playing in Europe right now. And obviously his call-up is well-deserved.
Where did you see him develop and get more comfortable this year, and where could he make big leaps next year? Because on talent, he's a guy that could and should be challenging for a best 11 place, who could, be trying to replicate some of the path that Miguel Almiron laid before him. How does he go that route as opposed to maybe, say, like the Ezekiel Barkle route?
Yeah, well, he's 3 assists away from Miguel Almiron's Atlanta record, club record of 14 assists. Almiron had 14 assists in the 2 years he was here, so that's a high mark. Julian Gressel hit 14 in 2018 as well. Thiago's sitting on 11. So already that part of his game, being a facilitator, being a creative playmaker, what I like to say, he is very much like a modern 10. He can play as a classic 10, South American 10, but he's very comfortable as a ball progressor as well. So I thought what he even told us after a game recently when he was asked about adjusting to the league, he said very confidently, I don't really think I had to adjust. I think I've done really well. Which says a lot about how he views himself as a player. I think he does have a lot of confidence in his skill. A few months ago when I wrote a story about Atlanta, I wrote that the adjustment was on the players around him. It was his teammates understanding the type of player that he was going to come close to you and try to get a touch and just give it back to you and then get it back again. And a lot of times, especially in positional play, which is how Pineda likes to play, which is how Heinze likes to play, if you're not forming triangles around a playmaker, you're not going to progress the ball and circulate it well. And those were some of the problems that Atlanta was having. And I felt like Almada was like trying to get in those positions and his teammates weren't clearly understanding. Now, end of the year, he's hitting that. I think they're all kind of finding that cohesion. But, if he sticks around, where he can improve, young players really always have to improve their decision making. Like, he can find the goal, he can find the pass, but he could be more consistent. And I think just the simplicity of the game around the penalty area, around the opponent's penalty area.
Felipe, you reckon that he will break the transfer fee record that was set by Miguel Almiron?
Probably. I didn't think that before, honestly, Doyle. Like, when he first came and, talking to sources in Argentina, and a lot of people are like, that is just a crazy amount of money to pay for a player coming to MLS. Everyone was in Argentina is clear that he's a very high caliber player with a very high ceiling, but the $16 million in this market and what Atlanta is expected to get from that in the future, I think there were a lot of doubts around that. Now maybe he's such a different player than Miguel Almiron, though. I think Miguel, we're all sort of impressed by the fact that, yes, one of the top nations in 2022, Argentina, has called up this player, but Miguel Almiron was doing a lot better at this stage of his career. He was still in this list that you guys are talking about today. He made his national team after performing at a high level in MLS. So there are a lot of things that Almada he's always, a player like him is always going to chase Miguel Almiron, and he's not quite there yet. But the transfer fee, that's a really good question. Like, I'm not going to rule it out. Like, my gut is telling me, like, maybe not, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's close.
What are they saying in Argentina about his place in this squad right now?
Well, I tweeted yesterday that right now he's still considered like the big surprise of this camp, right? And like most national team managers right now, 2 months away from the World Cup, Lionel Scaloni, what reporters are saying in Argentina is that he has his team pretty much 90 to 95% locked in. And a lot of the players that are coming into the September camp are guys that are going to Qatar, yes, like no doubt. And then there's like a couple fringe players that, like Brighton's McAllister, like, can he fit in? Enzo Fernandez from Benfica, former River Plate number 6. Key players in midfield that I think if Scaloni's saying, okay, I have enough attackers, what do I need to fortify? It's going to be the midfield and the back line. So Thiago Almada is for a lot of people, it's like, well, he's getting the pat on the back to say, you're part of this program moving forward. I think he has a lot of work to do to get on the plane to Qatar. But the door isn't shut. I just think that Lionel Scaloni has also proven to be one of those managers that doesn't change a lot. Like, he sticks to his guys. He knows that this group is vibing right now. They understand each other. Bringing in new players, could disrupt. But I think Thiago Almada just has like a certain skill set that, if you have a playmaker that's down, if for some reason Messi can't go, do you put that responsibility on Thiago Almada to World Cup? I doubt it, but like he can play the role, like not Messi, but he can do that. You can put him on the ball and force him to turn on guys and get the ball forward. Man, it's going to be exciting to see what happens this week, honestly.
This week, the rest of this year, and going forward for Thiago Almada. Huge talent, huge transfer fee for Atlanta. Will that pay off? I think we're still waiting to find out. But so far, good returns. Get him all the way up to number 2 on this list. Felipe, thank you for your time, man, helping us break down one of these top 3 players. Appreciate it as always.
Anytime. My pleasure.
All right, let's finish it with Jesus Ferreira. Charlie, if you're still there, we will bring you in, man. Let me see. Let me look over here. Yes, request. I've invited you to speak. Charlie Boehm wrote a really nice feature on Jesus Ferreira, number 1 on this list, 21 years old. I think it's 18 goals so far this year, Doyle. And if you think about his trajectory, I wrote today that it's basically like if you were to try to come up with, hey, this is my ideal, I'm an MLS club and I have an ideal homegrown player trajectory. It's probably Jesus Ferreira. It's the son of a former MLS MVP who stays in your academy, who you sign at 15, who gets some minutes in the academy, helps you win titles there, goes to USL, scores some goals, works his way into the first team, 8 goals in his first season, seems to be off and running. Yes, there was a blip after that, which we've discussed. but has now sort of broken into his own, is a DP for your team, the centerpiece of your team, a Golden Boot challenger, probably going to be the starter for the U.S. at a World Cup. It is literally the stuff of dreams.
It is. It is. It's and I'll admit, I did not see this year coming. After what Jesus Ferreira did last year, I thought, oh, okay, he's a classic shadow striker. You know, he's maybe he could develop into another 10, not exactly like his father was, like maybe more of a modern number 10. But there's no way he's going to be a number 9 of any sort in MLS. That was my thought process. But he's got 18 non-penalty goals as a 21-year-old. The only player in league history who's had more non-penalty goals at age 21 or younger is Stern John. And Stern John was sold for a lot of money back in 1998. That's how long ago this happened. So he's really, finding new ground here, not just for FC Dallas Academy kids, but for young players as a whole in MLS. It's exciting. And yeah, he's taking it to Qatar, and can't wait to see that.
Charlie, you wrote a really nice profile on the young man.
Hey, guys.
Tell us about that conversation, about what you took away.
Yeah, well, I think, Jesus is not known for being, I think, a super loquacious guy in interviews. And I had a pretty limited window to catch him one-on-one this weekend. He was kind of under the weather. I think he joined the team late in San Jose. So, but did the best with the circumstances. And I think he's been consciously open about his the work on the psychological side this season. He's mentioned it a number of times. I was on the USMNT media call a couple hours ago, and it came up again there too. For a guy who's, I think, he's kind of quiet by nature. For most of his career, he's been hyped. I mean, when you look at sort of the culture at FC Dallas, I mean, people have been talking about Jesus since he was, pre-adolescent, right? Between his dad and him sort of being the vanguard of their for lack of a better term, golden generation of good kids coming up in the academy. And I think he's another example of these kids that kind of are coming of age in the spotlight that didn't exist a few years ago. And I think that's been a challenge for him, but he's been really honest about, going to see a sports psychologist, addressing the increasing pressures of an increasing profile. And I give him a ton of credit for that, because I think, again, we easily underrate the sort of personal challenges that come with being a teenager who's thrust into the limelight on the level that any of the kids on this list are likely to encounter.
It's pretty incredible to me that he is the second fastest player in MLS. And when you watch him, that he has that speed, but maybe when you see it, it doesn't always equate to sort of that stark of a measurement of like, oh no, the data is telling us that he moves faster than everybody but Cade Cowell.
And I think you're also seeing the purpose. It's applied in a different way this season. And after his big game against LAFC a couple weeks ago, Nico Estevez talked about the specialization he's gotten, working as an out-and-out number 9. I dare say we can't really call him just a false 9 anymore. I think he kind of got stuck with that label. He can do false 9 things, but he's focused ever since Pepe left, kind of open up the opportunity for him to be the spearhead. And you're seeing Doyle, you've written about this on a couple of occasions, you're seeing the instincts that are sort of getting honed, and he's not, drifting in space anymore. He's not kind of, interpreting space in the way he did maybe a year or two ago. He's attacking that front post, or he's recognizing the run that he has to make and when to make it. And he gets on his horse, and it's subtle, but it's impressive. And I think he's a really great case study, not just for sort of the growing developmental infrastructure of the league, but also what players are capable of, even if you think them, right? Even if they've been pro for several years. He showed us things in the last year or so that people didn't really expect from him, and I think that's a great example of how much upside and how much capacity for growth these kids have in this modern system.
When do you think the time comes that Jesus Ferreira is no longer in MLS? I mean, that is sort of the elephant in the room for almost all of these players. That there may well come a time, and that's sort of by design at this point, intentional, that time will come. You don't sign Doyle Jesus to a DP contract. There's multiple reasons. One is to reward him. He's the centerpiece of your team. The other is to give yourself a good negotiating position if somebody else comes in. How long do you think this lasts? How long do we get to watch him in MLS?
I mean, the hope as a U.S. national team fan is that he plays so well in leading the U.S. national team deep into the knockout rounds of the World Cup that another 8-figure offer comes FC Dallas's way. I wouldn't be shocked if that happened, even if he doesn't play great, and even if the U.S. doesn't play great, because the numbers he's putting up, the athletic measurements that we have because of the tracking data, the soccer IQ that he just so clearly has. Dallas might get the kind of offer that they can't say no to as soon as this winter. Nobody should be surprised at that. That said, he's a full-on DP now. He is, this isn't a max TAM contract that they just hung a DP sign on for roster management reasons. Like he's a full-on DP. He's played really well. So if it doesn't happen this winter, don't be surprised if he comes back and plays even better soccer next year.
And next year we'll have another 22 under 22. But for this year, that's all we've got. Go to MLSsoccer.com or the MLS app to check out the full list, as well as Tom aptly promoted, all the content around it, whether it's Charlie's really nice profile on Jesus Ferreira. We've got all the snubs from Joe Lowry. I've got a best 11 because you knew I would on there as well. And I cheated a little bit because there's no center backs on the list. You can go see how I cheated at MLSsoccer.com. Once again, your top 5 on this year's list: Julian Araujo of the Galaxy, Gaga Slonina of the Chicago Fire, Magno of NYCFC, Thiago Almada of Atlanta United, and Jesus Ferreira is your number 1 of FC Dallas, currently with the U.S. men's national team. We'll be watching him in Qatar. Thank you for tuning in on this special Tuesday, everybody. Wish you a great week, great international break as well. We'll have live shows and live watch-alongs for the U.S. and Canada on Friday, so we'll see you then. In the meantime, adios. Have a good week.